Today, I want to explore how the deep-rooted, almost biological urge of ours to explore social dynamics is one of the primary driving factors of the social justice movement. Our ability to navigate these dynamics are deeply rooted in how much we practice them. For example, you drive a car, you practice for that. You operate heavy machinery in a factory, you practice for that too. You want to win the F1 race, besides for simple innate talent, your win highly depends on both the quantity and quality of your practice between you and the race. When you practice, you are in a sense exploring the dynamic between you and the race. You will have the tools helping you win, which is your reflexes, your car, and your team. Then you have the race you're supposed to win. The more you practice, the more you understand at which split second in the upcoming turn you should turn and with what force to turn the wheel to be as efficient as you can, since the better, more efficient turns in the race you make, the better chance of beating the race. You exploring the intricacies of the race, the turns, the grip of the road on your tires, your car's acceleration when cutting off your fellow racers, is in fact you exploring the dynamic between you and the race. Anyway, enough rambling about races. The key to understand is that the more practice understanding the dynamics, whether it's between the F1 racer and his track or whether it's the social dynamics between different people and groups, the more practice you'll have and the better you'll understand it. Which is why in the F1's case helps him win the race, and in another case helps you understand better social dynamics and therefore gives you a huge advantage in navigating them. You also see this intense urge of exploring dynamics in roleplay and adult play. Some may choose a slightly more simple dynamic of just sub and down. Others will explore not having enough money to pay for the pizza delivery guy. Some will explore the idea of blackmail, which through acting it out you learn the dynamics of using power, or the opposite, which is how power is used against you. There are many intricacies, for example, how the subject is brought up. What tools does the person being blackmailed have to thwart the blackmailer's attack? Or from the blackmailer's perspective, how does he sound enough convincing or threatening? What language does he use to subdue whom he or she is trying to blackmail? Language can have a massive effect on our psychological states, from the connotation of words to words triggering good or bad childhood memories. A simple example is the word investigate. The literal meaning of investigate simply means to observe or check out something. But our connotation of a criminal investigation, but our connotation is that investigate is of a criminal investigation or a investigation. So the word investigate creates a stronger reaction in us than the word check out or observe, even though they can have very similar meanings. As an example, I have actually noticed foreign speakers using the word investigate to say, I will investigate the cafe, when they simply mean check out to see if it's good. And this is because the dynamic, or perhaps I should use another word here, between the speaker and the language hasn't been practiced enough, which makes the goal, which is communication, very unclear. The reason I'm going down a rabbit hole to talk about something random like the connotation of a specific word or is precisely to explain how dynamics are made of these thousands of minute strings almost things, which is why we have a strong biological urge to explore them and practice with them, because there isn't any point where it's enough. There's always something more about a dynamic to learn, and the better you understand these dynamics, the better you can navigate them. Now let's explore another dynamic, the role play between a worker and a boss. You have a worker and you have a coworker dynamic. Those are very close together. Then you have worker and you have a boss dynamic. These are further away. What does that mean? You have more to learn about this, and the more you can learn about it, the more enticing it feels to you. Then you have a worker and the CEO dynamic, an even bigger dynamic to explore. The bigger dynamic you explore, the more you learn, and most dynamics overlap. For example, in boss, CEO, and blackmailer scenario all include power dynamics, language, and there's probably at least 100 more which I'll never think about. But the point is to understand that because there's so many of these small strings that make up the rope of a dynamic, they almost always overlap with future real life scenarios that you might find yourself in. This can be an argument with a nurse who in some sense holds some power over you, or it may be a negotiation between friends where being cordial and emphasizing is just as important for your dynamic. Now let's explore how this relates to the relationship between our biological urge to explore dynamics and how that relates to the social justice movement and really any social justice in the past too. So before I gave the example of a worker and a boss, we can have a worker and a coworker as one dynamic, but they're very close together. So somewhat similar and not as much to learn about. Then we've got the worker and the boss. They are further apart. So it's a way more interesting dynamic than we've got the worker and we've got the CEO dynamic. These are further apart, meaning it's a much more unusual scenario and therefore potentially more interesting, and a higher, shall I say, score of potentially learning new micro skills when it comes to dynamics. So in the same way, the CEO is far, so in the same way that the CEO is far from the worker, in a similar way, the stereotype rich white liberal is further away from the Mexican immigrant, or, for an example, a random American living in a nearby neighborhood. So in the same way that worker is here and coworker is here, or worker is here and CEO is here, you've got rich white liberal over here and um, immigrant over here. It's just about how far their experiences are. So in this example, we've got a rich white liberal is pretty close to the average American. So that's a less interesting and exciting and potentially less beneficial role play scenario than the role play between a rich white liberal, which is here, and a Mexican immigrant, which is here, much further away, making the role play much more exciting and satisfying. The further away someone is to you, the more you can learn from them, simply because there's less overlap between you and them. Just like someone learning biology can learn more from someone doing sociology than from someone doing chemistry, simply because biology overlaps already with chemistry. So they already have some of the chemistry knowledge. And just in case I'm not being clear, even though the liberal does not meet the immigrant to roleplay together, the act of feeling bad for them role-playing their experience in their head is in a way you role-playing the dynamic. In this case, more of exploring the dynamic of a victim and how that feels and what you can learn from that dynamic. Because although we like to put traits, class, and dynamics in absolute categories of being good or bad, it's more a case of that a good trait or class, etc., will get you what you need, for example, 70% of the time instead of 30% of the time, or let's say even 95% of the time versus 5% of the time. But if you simply change the context, what only works 5% of the time can work 95% of the time. So of course there's an advantage to being the stereotype rich white liberal, but role-playing in your head the side of being the victim or immigrant gives us some insight of the dynamic of the victim and what tools they have for accomplishing their interest in real life. We never fall into one category, it just depends on where we are and the time. Everyone needs to understand every dynamic, just like some rich person needs to understand the victim dynamic of, for example, falling to a scam or being coerced by an even bigger business. And how they navigate that dynamic is extremely important for achieving the desired outcome. Anyway, if you've enjoyed this video, then you probably will enjoy my one other video titled The Answer to the Trolley Problem. The idea of it is actually extremely fascinating and tackles the problem in a very interesting way by explaining what your brain does when you have any moral problem and why, by some coincidence, we have a similar idea of what's right and what's wrong. If you're not familiar with the trolley problem, you can find many short clips on YouTube showing different scenarios of the problem, which is pretty easy to understand. Maybe unlike this video.